Hey everyone, welcome back to Horse to Cinema, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Worst Person in the World, which is the latest film from Joachim Trier. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. He's a Norwegian director, and I think this is his third film, if I'm correct, in his Oslo trilogy, all based around the city of Oslo. I just want to say right off the bat that I really love Scandinavian movies in general. Of course, you have directors like Ingmar Bergman from Sweden, who, for my money, is one of the best directors to ever live. Movies like Persona, The Seventh Seal, Wild Strawberries, I think he did. But there's also a lot of modern filmmakers from the region, like Thomas Vinterberg, for example, who's made movies like The Hunt. And he made personally my favorite movie of 2020, which was Another Round with Mads Mikkelsen. I think what I really like about movies from Scandinavia is that they're not really as afraid as, say, definitely American movies, but even some other movies from Western countries like, even the UK. They're not afraid to tackle taboo subjects, especially topics related to sex and relationships that might be a bit more taboo in the US or the UK, for example, are a lot less so in Scandinavian countries, at least in the films that come out of there. And I think The Worst Person in the World is a really good example of that, particularly how it deals with the subject of cheating. A lot of those movies where, they depict somebody cheating, they typically, judge the character very harshly rather than let the audience kind of decide for themselves how they feel about the situation. And I think The Worst Person in the World is a really good example of a movie that it does exactly, it lets you decide how you feel about the decisions that this character makes, these probably, in my opinion, very bad decisions. And I really find movies like that refreshing. And there's been a lot of them to come out, I think, in the past year, from Licorice Pizza to certainly Red Rocket, and now The Worst Person in the World. You have, kind of protagonists that are not exactly great people, and they certainly do things in the movies that are, questionable to say the least, if not, downright immoral. But the movie itself doesn't judge them. It's up to the audience to sort of interpret it for ourselves and kind of weave it into, our imagination about the movie itself. Personally, I'd rather see a character that is doing questionable things, and I'd rather be intrigued as to why they're doing it, as opposed to the movie, bashing me over the head with how I'm supposed to feel about the situation. Because we all get it, cheating is bad, but there are, reasons why she's doing the things she's doing that are quite interesting, and maybe you can relate to those a lot more than, the actual cheating itself that goes on, which I certainly could. So this story follows Julie, who is a late 20s woman from Oslo, as she tries to find a path in her life, both romantically and in her career. Naturally, she's at a very indecisive place in her life, and she's not very satisfied with kind of how her life is at the moment, and so she decides to do very drastic things to try and, change her life and in some ways almost reset. And again, even though Julie does, things that are not exactly moral, personally, I really love how this movie depicts just the fear of commitment. I'm, very young myself, I'm 22, and so the idea of, choosing a career or the idea of getting married, these are very terrifying prospects in a lot of ways. And while I've never, gone to the extent, obviously, that Julie has to, avoid these kind of decisions, I can certainly relate to the sort of angst that you feel, as a result of being at this very, paramount fork in the road type of place in life. And, despite the kind of safety that this very normal path, provides for you, I can certainly relate to the feeling of just, wanting to blow it all up because it just doesn't feel right to just sort of commit to everything. The prospect of that is just quite scary. And to sort of put you into the mindset of Julie as she kind of makes a lot of these decisions. The film has a lot of surrealist sequences that are used, I think, in very intelligent ways to sort of, give a dreamlike quality to a lot of these scenarios that she's going through. To sort of, show that this is, this is the fantasy of a lot of people, rather than a reality that is necessarily worth pursuing. This movie is largely, quite critically acclaimed, but one criticism I have seen of it is that a lot of people think that as the movie goes on, the main character, Julie, becomes a bit more opaque as opposed to, clear. It's difficult to sort of understand her motivations as the film goes on. That's one of the major criticisms I've been hearing of this film. And I'm not necessarily going to disagree with that in an objective sense. I'm not sure the film did do a lot to sort of, to clear up what her motivations are, as the film progressed. But I will say that for me, I certainly felt like I understood her more as the movie, went on. I think there's just a real, universality in the idea of feeling aimless. Like I said, it's sort of the same reason you can relate to Alana in Licorice Pizza, even though she does things that are questionable to say the least. You don't relate to the act that they do, you relate to the aimless feeling that causes them to behave the way they do. And I'm not sure that in The Worst Person in the World or in Licorice Pizza, they do a great job of showing these character motivations. And yet, just because of the way that they portray it, and just kind of the dialogue and the way the characters carry themselves, I feel like I fully understand where they're coming from. And I think for these motivations, there are rare cases where I think it's okay to leave some of this stuff up for interpretation. And I think that's certainly the case with this movie. Julie's sort of torn between a very traditional path for a young woman and, a more Nordic attitude in a lot of ways. Scandinavia is very known for being quite open about sex and just being a bit more non-traditional compared to a lot of other Western countries. And there certainly are a lot of hints in the film that, she has a very Nordic and frankly a very feminist attitude towards her own prospects in life, and you can really feel that both just in her character and obviously in the decisions she makes. One thing I also loved is how this movie dealt with a cancer subplot. I don't think that's a huge spoiler, I won't say who it is obviously, but there is a subplot involving cancer. And there are so many movies out there that whenever there's a cancer subplot, they either, deal with it in a very forced sentiment, shoving the sentiment down your throat kind of way, or maybe they try and get you to look at the more positive acts of cancer, like the acceptance of death or something. And oftentimes that really just bugs me. I'm thinking of a movie like The Bucket List, for example. I really think that The Worst Person in the World is so honest, like brutally honest, about the finality of it, the brutal trip it can be for somebody going through cancer. It does not lie, does not mince words about how much it just sucks for everyone involved. And it really just puts into perspective how trivial everything else is outside of, the idea of just being alive in the first place. And, because it shows that everything else is so trivial, that puts things into perspective for Julie, who again is going through this, phase in her life where she's trying to decide what's really important and for herself. And I think just thematically, that cancer plot fits really well into eventually understanding the character of Julie. So although the movie has been criticized by some people for just her, basic character motivations, again, it really didn't bother me. I can see where they're coming from a little bit, but I personally had no problem feeling like I understood this character. My one flaw that I do have with the movie has to do with pacing. The movie has sort of a chaptered structure. I think it's 12 chapters to be exact. The things that will come up on the screen and tell you chapter 1, 2, etc. And oftentimes when movies do that, I feel like I'm just, whenever one chapter comes on, I'm sort of thinking about how long each chapter is taking. And so that sort of takes me out of the whole experience of the film just a little bit when thinking about the structure of it. I just think, most movies would be better without any kind of structure, like any kind of very forced structure like that. So I wasn't a big fan of it. So yeah, there's a few little things. And is the story as cohesive as it could be? Probably not. You could argue that, it could be clearer about the motivations of Julie, but I really kind of don't think it needs to be. I feel like if a movie really works, emotionally for me, where I feel like I understand the character, even though the movie hasn't exactly spelled it out, I'm more willing to forgive a lot of those technical flaws as long as I can feel what the movie, ultimately kind of wants me to feel. And in the case of The Worst Person in the World, I can tell you I was invested from beginning to end. I absolutely recommend checking this out if you haven't. I'm gonna give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Anyway, that's the review. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like it down below, and as well as subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more content coming out soon, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.